Good evening, everyone, and hello to those who are joining us online. I want to first thank our partners, BlackRock and the IFC, for helping to curate and co-host this first Singapore Sustainable Investing and Financing Conference, SSIFC. My thanks too to PricewaterhouseCoopers for their support too for this conference. I take this opportunity to also thank PSA and the SP Group. They are the main sponsors for the hybrid Ecosperity Week this season. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you. Your active participation augurs well for an inclusive and net zero carbon economy by 2050. This evening, I would like to touch on 3 takeaways. 1, the genesis and philosophy of Ecosperity. 2, the nexus between investors, businesses, and society. And 3, the climate emergency. First, why Ecosperity? Well, Temasek is an intergenerational investor. We want a resilient portfolio, one which can deliver returns, not just for the present generation, but for the future generations to come. This is also why good governance and sustainability have been our twin guideposts. 10 years ago, we saw accelerating growth in Asia, but we knew growth at all costs will be self-limiting and ultimately destructive. What should we do? We found inspiration in the Singapore story. Singapore was a fledgling nation struggling to make a living in the 1960s. Yet our founding fathers insisted on planting trees for a green Singapore, keeping our air fresh and our waters clean. We have enjoyed clean, green, inclusive growth till today. Over in the US, Europe, and Japan in the 1970s, heavily polluted cities like LA or London or Tokyo cleaned up their air and washed soot off their grimy buildings. Result, they ushered in good quality, non-pollutive growth and got a new lease of life. Plant trees along streets, homes on the side with trees would command higher values because trees make for a cooler, greener, happier space. Uncover a city stream, we would re-energize street life for people because the running stream would cool and refresh the common space. Conclusion, a clean and green environment does bring inclusive prosperity for people. Conversely, you have heard throughout this last 3 days, human prosperity at the expense of nature and our planet cannot last. One of our enthusiastic young staff took eco from ecology and joined it with the second half of prosperity, and so Ecosperity was born. We held an inaugural conference in 2014 to advocate the symbiotic twinning of ecology and prosperity. In other words, planet and people. Last year, COVID-19 became a showstopper for bringing Ecosperity Asia to China. So I'm very pleased this year that we could restart the 7th edition of Ecosperity Week in a hybrid mode. Over the past 3 days, there have been rich discussions, deep content in 3 areas: decarbonization and climate action, reimagining nature and resources, sustainable investing and financing, what you have heard today. The challenges they present are also opportunities for investors, businesses, and society. This brings me to the second takeaway, the nexus between investors, businesses, and societies. Investors are driving change, from individuals and family offices to large institutions. Businesses too are coming on board, and society is pushing for change, from the young, who will inherit the planet, to the silver generation who are planting trees to shade future generations. Their common cause is an inclusive prosperity that can sustain planet and people. How? New knowledge drives new ways of doing things. Innovation enables new business models to meet the changing needs of society. So the future of rapidly advancing technology demands that we learn, unlearn, and relearn constantly throughout our lives. Learning must therefore go beyond basic schooling or training for a job. I have two suggestions. The first is to foster a learning culture as part of work life. And the second is to help our workforce prepare for retirement or life after work and beyond work. A learning culture keeps the brain young, the mind open, and the body active and healthy. Both employer and employee must take joint ownership for learning. For instance, at Temasek, our staff can choose to learn a programming language, a foreign language, a musical instrument, or even to learn to dance. These options were offered specifically to help keep the brain supple, to open our hearts to different cultures, and to expand our horizons. But there's another important benefit. They break down barriers of age, rank, or department as people learn together. This shapes a culture of trust, fosters discipline with creativity, and encourages agile problem solving with an open mind. Individually, our employees now have skills or knowledge that they can take anywhere with them, outside work, into their family life, into another job, or even into retirement. Another aspect of preparing for retirement is saving and investing for retirement. This needs to start as soon as someone enters the workforce. This also means we must create suitable products for young investors, for first-time investors, as well as for retirees and small investors. In Singapore, CapitaLand pioneered the development of the Real Estate Investment Trust almost 20 years ago. Their first REIT was a portfolio of high-performing shopping malls. Retail investors can easily visit these malls to see for themselves if the malls are doing well. The S-REIT market in Singapore has since grown to over 100 billion Singapore dollars. Retail investors can now choose from over 40 different REITs and property trusts. They range from hospitality to commercial assets. S-REITs have also democratized these big-ticket assets for the small investors. At the same time, companies were able to tap on a new class of investors to lighten their balance sheets. Similarly, Temasek has pioneered a series of bonds backed by baskets of private equity funds. These diversify and reduce risks for the retail investors and socialize them to the world of PE funds. We are working to open the equity piece for retail investors too. Looking ahead, you have heard over the course of today especially, as governments and investors put money into green infrastructure as part of the transition to a net zero world, I urge them to open new opportunities for the retail investors to invest for their own retirement or to invest for their children. In short, the nexus between investors, businesses, and society is people. We have a collective and shared responsibilities between us, between investors and businesses, governments, and the workers themselves to foster lifelong learning and to prepare ahead for retirement. Finally, on climate emergency. Based on the current policies of governments and the practices of businesses and people, we are heading for an increase of 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2040. This is less than 20 years away. At this rate, we will fail to cap the average global surface temperature rise to less than 1.5 degrees by 2050. We're getting there faster than we should. The glacier melts are accelerating, and the beautiful ice cap of Kilimanjaro is almost gone for good. Global warming isn't just a sea level threat to coastal cities. It was shocking to see massive fires and floods take hundreds of lives far inland in Europe, in Germany, for instance, in China, and the US in recent times. Yet, as a global community, we continue to pump out increasing amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into our atmosphere without regard for tomorrow. Do you know the top 5 emitters account for 60% of our global CO2 emissions? Just China and US together account for 40% of global emissions. China leads at 27%, over a quarter of the global emissions. This is followed by US at 13%. The next three are the EU at 8%, India at 7%, and Russia at 5%. Since 2005, the EU has cut its emissions by a creditable 30%. Big credit to them. This is followed by the US at 12% reduction. But China's emission over the same period grew by over 60%, while India's more than doubled. Total global emissions grew. Carbon abatement needs government actions now, especially by these top 5 emitters. Investors and businesses must act too, but how? You have heard many times during this conference, a decade ago, most companies would be puzzled when asked to take climate action. These days, companies will ask how they can make a start, how they can do their part. Some are driven by their investors and shareholders. We heard from Larry Fink 2 days ago how